Hello and welcome to the Capa podcast. My name's Matt. I'm the senior practitioner for Capa First Response, and I'm joined today, as ever, by our founder and CEO, Jane Griffiths. Hi, Jane. How you doing?
Hey, Matt. How you doing? So lovely to be here with you.
With me.
Face to face.
I know.
In your lovely flat. Sunny.
It's a rare treat, isn't it?
Fantastic. You know what? It is a rare treat.
Yeah.
I think it's so lovely to be together to record this.
Yeah, I agree. It already feels a lot more real.
Yeah.
Better. Yeah. So this series is going to be slightly different to what we've done previously, isn't it? Do you want to say a little bit about why we're doing this series to begin with?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess our previous series that we've thought about, we've sort of been in conversation with, or we've been Zooming and speaking to particular people about particular issues. This one is really designed for families who feel a bit more isolated, whether that be via location or through circumstances and their experience, feel like they're unable to talk to people. And we wanted to provide something that families could access 24/7, regardless of their locations. I also think it's really important to say that East Sussex Local Authority sort of really commissioned us to do this because they really wanted to support families living in those rural outlying areas who found it really, really difficult to get support. And we'll be offering I guess if we were to sit, Matt, and think about what would be our top 5 or 6 strategies, we're sort of aiming to sort of think about those strategies for families, aren't we? That's what the series is going to be about. Yeah,
so it's a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit. I mean, I think hopefully all of our podcasts have been useful, but this is something a bit more tangible, a bit more solid that people can use and put into practice.
Yeah, we're not thinking about, these episodes aren't for about us understanding what this issue is. This is really, let's go, what's the support that we offer to families? And let's share that. Yeah.
I think you said a minute ago that these are like probably 5 or 6 of our top strategies that we know are useful to quite a few different families that we work with. But it's always really important to say that nothing works all of the time. And there isn't one thing that is going to work for every single family. And even if it works for that family, it doesn't mean that it's going to work 100% of the time. So it's just important that we say that at the top, I think, to say these are all ideas that, have a listen, keep it in mind. Hopefully you think, I'm going to give that a try. But even if you think, it's not going to work for me, that doesn't feel quite right, hopefully you'll still think about the idea behind it. And even if you don't action anything from it, you can think about why it might be useful and why it might be important. And hopefully there's some use in that as well.
Yeah, and I think, a reminder that all of our work and all of our support to families is tailored and bespoke. We speak to families and think, what's happening for them in their home? And we can, it could be that we don't talk about any of these strategies, but generally what we've found out is these strategies come into our support at some point for families. And there will be somebody out there listening to this and maybe think, I can't get on board with what Matt, I can't get on board with what that strategy that you've spoken about, but I can really get on board with this other strategy. And we anticipate that and expect that. I think what's important as well is that, everything we're going to be sharing in this series, it's not going to do any harm. It's all relationship building. And that's only a positive thing. You may see things, and we'll talk about that in one of the episodes that we're going to be presenting about, what can happen if actually things do feel different. My child has noticed something's different. What do I do then? So, and we'll sort of address that, won't we? I think it's episode 2 when we're thinking about our safety planning.
Okay. So that's a little bit about why we're doing it. And some of the things we're going to be covering, but it's going to look a little bit different from our other podcasts, right?
Yep. Yeah. So, up until now, it's been us chatting, hasn't it? And having conversations. What we've decided to do with this, which will look a little bit different, is at the beginning of every episode, we'll have a little explanation around what we're doing. This isn't about explaining why this happens, because we've done that. This is about sharing those strategies, how we would share them with a family. So we're doing it separately. So I'm going to be presenting 3 of them and thinking about 3 strategies, and you're going to be presenting 3 of them and support 3 strategies.
Yeah.
But we're doing them solo, so they won't have that opportunity of a back and forth. And I think that's going to be the main difference that people will see.
Yeah, and I think that's hopefully will make it a little bit more useful, because you can follow along. You're not listening to a conversation like you're saying of us back and forth. You're listening to us giving you a strategy as we would, in a session. Yeah. If as we were explaining it to you and kind of telling you why we're suggesting you do this, what the background is to it. Is there anything else we've missed, Jane?
I don't think we have. Hopefully we can just let's do it. Let's give it a go.
All right, let's get into it.
Matt, so episode 4.
Yep.
And today you are going to be presenting about the drama triangle.
Yeah.
And the communication pie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about those?
Yeah. So 2 really important things that I think we often talk about with parents in sessions, because again, they help you to view what's going on a little bit more from a sort of bird's eye view, rather than just being in the middle of it, being caught up in it's all flying around you. It's so hard to make sense of it when it's like that. The drama triangle, Cartman's drama triangle, is useful as a way of understanding conflict and thinking about the roles and the dynamics when we're in conflict. So that can be really useful. Help you to kind of see, rather than this is happening to me, this is happening, a little bit, okay, these are the roles we are taking up here, and observing how they shift. So that's really useful.
Yeah.
And the communication pie is a really good way of thinking about our communication and how the areas of our communication that are most important, essentially. What's carrying the most weight? What messages are getting through? Now, sometimes the communication pie, what we're going to talk about in that, can link into the drama triangle, because what happens in the communication aspect is what can set that drama triangle in motion. So we'll look at them both together. So yeah.
And I think it's really important to, emphasize as well that communication is key, isn't it? In a lot of the support that we're offering to families.
It's everything, isn't it, really?
It's not also only how you communicate with your child, but how to communicate with everybody else around you. And that's what I like about all the strategies, really, we think about. They can be put across all aspects of your life.
Yeah.
All of us, and it's the more we embed them, the more they just become natural to us.
Yeah.
So
how many times have you heard that? I was using the drama triangle. I was thinking about validation with my husband or with my wife or my partner, and it's really nice when you do hear those things, because
and then you see it everywhere, Matt.
Yeah.
Suddenly we introduce the drama triangle or even the communication pie, and we're like, oh my God, my tone of voice. Oh my goodness. You start thinking much more mindfully about how we're communicating, which is why I think they're really important ones.
You know what that word mindfully, it's that awareness, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you start looking at things in slightly different ways, because very often when you're experiencing issues like what we're talking about, is my cat going wild over there, Jane?
Yeah. Yeah.
My cat, she lives here as well, so she may make an appearance. But yeah, sometimes you can get stuck in one way of looking at things, especially when you spend so much time in a heightened state yourself, because you're in what you're experiencing is triggering. It's so stressful, so difficult to deal with, and our minds can become a little bit they see things from one way. So if we can just see things from a few different angles, we can make a little bit of movement, and that movement's what's necessary in order to create change. So you can go from being in a cycle of conflict to sort of being in that cycle of cooperation a little bit more.
I look forward to hearing more in your presentation, Matt. Are you ready?
I am. So the drama triangle and communication pie, two separate things, but linked. So we're going to do them both together. So they're both really useful. And I think the thing that makes these particularly useful is that it helps you to sort of look more of a bird's eye view of what's going on rather than just being in it. Things flying at you from all angles, as I said. It helps you to make a bit more sense of things. So it's a really useful model to think about. We're starting with the drama triangle. It's a really useful model when we're thinking about what happens when we're in conflict and the roles that we're likely to take up. And it was originally developed by Dr. Stephen Cartman in the 1960s, and it's been used in various settings. Obviously, we're using it to think about family dynamics, the relationships, the roles within those complicated parent-child relationships. We've kind of, I guess, tweaked it for our work, really. But there's loads you can read about this online. So if you're interested, really encourage you to look more into it. So the drama triangle, I'm going to draw it out. If you imagine an upside down triangle, so I say upside down triangle, is there an upside? I don't know if that even makes sense, but where the base is at the top and then, the single point is at the bottom. So if you want to draw this along, you can, or just if you're watching, you can see us drawing it out. So an upside down triangle. At the bottom point, you have the victim. At the top left point, you have the persecutor, and at the top right point, you have the rescuer. Now, these three roles are the ones that we are likely to go to when we're in conflict. There's a few important things to keep in mind here. The victim is down the bottom for a reason. The victim, well, actually, before I go into that, these roles are perceived. Okay, we're not saying this is absolute truth. This is, this person is definitely a victim. This person is definitely a persecutor. But this is how it will feel. When you're in it, these roles feel very real. That's our perception. And our perception is our experience of life, So I'm not saying it's absolute fact, but it's kind of how it will feel. So down the bottom, you've got the victim. The victim will feel sincerely as though they are a victim. They'll feel powerless, like they have no agency, like things are being done to them that they can't control. It's that feeling that life is happening to you. Doesn't feel fair. So that's the victim. Now, they're the only one at the bottom. They perceive themselves to have no power. The top two roles are the persecutor and the rescuer. So the persecutor is perceived to be someone who is domineering, maybe critical. They probably make the rules, they enforce the rules. They may be seen to be someone who is, overly harsh, gives out punishments, that kind of thing. So that's the persecutor role. And then over the other side, you have the rescuer, someone who seeks to rescue. It may be they seek a victim that they can then rescue. But again, that's a position of power, the rescuer. You're making choices for the other person. I'm going to fix this for you. Don't worry, I can step in. I have power here. I'm not powerless as you are. So these are our three roles: victim, rescuer, and persecutor. So I'm just looking at my notes. Yeah, they're perceived. So the roles, there may be one role that feels, you may go, yeah, that's me. I'm the victim here. Or you may go, yeah, I'm the rescuer. Now, you may be more likely to take up one role than the others, but in all likelihood, you're going to cycle between all three of these, or at least a number of them, and they're going to change within a conflict, and then over time they may change as well. So none of us is ever just one role, in all likelihood. Now, the thing is we're all kind of hardwired to take up these roles, but they're not useful. So the idea being that if we can bring a greater awareness to these roles, and bring a greater awareness to the dynamic, what's kind of going on within it, we can then become a little bit more mindful and make kind of, I guess, more helpful choices in terms of how we respond, how we react. So I'll give you a quick example of how you may see this playing out in your home. So let's say, you've said to your child, well, look, you can go on, I don't know, you can go on your Xbox tonight, but listen, you need to make sure that washing up's done and that you've brought down your dirty clothes. Okay, put them in the washing machine, something like that. So I'm going out to work now. You get in, the dishes are still in the sink, the clothes aren't in the washing machine, and you come and you say, well, look, I told you to make sure the washing up was done. You're not going to use the Xbox until you've done these kind of chores, these jobs, which is completely fair enough. But in that instance, you take up the role of persecutor. Now, something I didn't mention earlier on, we can't be in two places at one time. So you can't be both persecutor and the victim at the same time. You can jump between them very quickly, but you can't be both at the same time. And if you're in one, someone else is going to be somewhere else. So as you take up the persecutor role, you place your child in the victim role. They are likely going to feel sincerely as though they're a victim here. This isn't fair. Yeah, but you don't get it. There's a reason why I didn't. And you're being unfair to me. And no, why can't I play my Xbox or whatever it is? In that moment, as I said, you take up the persecutor role, places them in victim. They feel as though they are a victim. They feel this isn't fair. This is being done to them. Now, for many young people who struggle to regulate their emotions, we've talked about this previously. Often there's a reason why. There may be a history of trauma there. There may be a reason why this person is particularly sensitive to feeling out of control. Why it's intolerable for them not to be in control, for them to intolerable for them to feel as though they're in that victim role. So in all likelihood, the first sign that they get of being in that victim role, something's going to jump up inside them and go, whoa, we can't deal with this. So what they do is they're going to flip it. So they can't tolerate being in that victim role, and you're currently in that persecutor role. So what they do is they flip it, and they're going to come back at you and go, no, you can't tell me what to do. I'm not going to do that. In this instance, they've jumped up to persecutor and they've placed you down in victim. Now, okay, it's not fair, but what's happened is they're safe now. They're out of that victim role where they feel powerless, where they feel helpless, where they have no agency, no control. And they're in a position of power and control. So now they feel safe. They're out of that intolerable place down there in victim. But you found yourself there and you don't deserve to be there. Now you feel unsafe. And you're going to be triggered, and you may it's likely that you think, well, I can't tolerate being here. I don't deserve to be here. So what happens then is you go, I'm not going to accept you talking to me like that. If you carry on like that, then, you're not getting your Xbox for another week. I'm taking it away. You've jumped up to that persecutor role. You're trying to get that upper hand, be the persecutor, to have that power and that control, placing your child down in victim. And they go, you ain't going to take my Xbox away. I'm going to take it. You come back, they come back, you come back, they come back. And you're jumping between these roles, victim and persecutor. Now, this is going to lead to an escalation. Each time you do that, the temperature's ramping up a little bit. And it doesn't help you. As we've spoke about previously, your main aim initially always is to de-escalate a situation, because when we de-escalate, it's just the safest thing to do. It is safer to de-escalate. So that's our focus to begin with. Also, when we de-escalate, we can then get a thinking brain back online. We can have a conversation with that part of the brain. In that emotional state, in this instance, we did 3 faces previously. Maybe you're both heading up towards phase number 2 here. You both don't have a lot of your thinking brain online. A lot of what's coming out is coming from that feeling brain, which isn't the most rational. So de-escalation, and then we can make sense of it. That's always the first step. But if we choose to, well, not we choose, as if, well, kind of choose, yeah, but it's hard to make that choice. It's hard to be aware of that. But if we continue taking up these roles, victim, persecutor, we'll talk about rescuer in a minute as well, likelihood is this conflict is going to continue and it's going to escalate. And you're kind of vying for that upper hand of being the persecutor, to get control. Now, I'm going to talk. Shall I talk about the? Yeah, I'm going to talk about the rescuer role briefly. So those, most parents that I speak with, those the victim and persecutor role, are the ones they really connect with. But also sometimes they can say, "Look, I didn't do anything, and it just came out of nowhere." We'll talk about this a bit more in a moment as well when we come to the communication pie. But we'll talk about this in terms of the rescuer. Sometimes by being the rescuer, that reinforces the victim's position as well. So there's a problem and you step in, go, don't worry, I'm going to deal with this. I've done this for you. You don't need to do it. Now you've done a nice thing, right? And it's helpful. You may think this is just a lovely thing I'm doing, and it can only be perceived in that way. But what taking up that rescuer role can do sometimes is making choices for the other person, the child in this case, taking control away from them. It can be as well that by taking up that rescuer role, you reinforce the idea that, that child is the victim. You reinforce that idea that, I can't solve this on my own. I am powerless. I am helpless here. And they can't tolerate that, as we've talked about. So by you doing something helpful at times, and I'm not saying by any means don't help your children, don't do anything helpful. That's not it. It's just bringing awareness to this. But by taking up that rescuer role, you reinforce that idea of the child being the victim, or you take control away from them by making a choice about something. They can't tolerate that. And so you can very quickly go from, I was just helping out, to your child feeling as though they're the victim, to not being able to tolerate that, to jumping up to persecute, to you ending up in victim. And you go, how do we end up here? I was just helping you a second ago, and now you're giving me all this whole barrage of abuse. What's going on here? So that can be what happens sometimes, in terms of the rescuer role and the victim, and how that dynamic works. So one thing to sort of recognize these roles, but it's good to know what to do about it as well. Because as I said, if you take up any one of these 3 roles, likelihood is this conflict's going to continue. If you allow yourself to view yourself as a victim, most likely is you're not going to be able to tolerate it. You're going to have to try and jump up to persecutor to get out of that victim role. It's going to carry things on. If your child feels as though they're a victim, they're going to have to jump up to persecutor to get out of it. If you take up that rescuer role, it keeps your child in victim. Again, it may perpetuate what's going on. This is going to continue this conflict and this escalation. So instead of responding from any one of those 3 points on that triangle, instead, the idea is to respond from a kind of middle ground. And that middle ground is one of responsibility and compassion. So to start with, responsibility. Now, knowing about this dynamic, as the adult, I guess, in the room, you want to take responsibility for saying, I'm not going to play a part in this carrying on. I'm not going to allow myself to be on this drama triangle, to just allow this to play out in this way. I'm going to make a choice to do something about it. So that's taking responsibility, taking action. So that's the first step, guiding things in a better direction, taking responsibility for that. The second step is responding with compassion. So recognizing, what was it that got us on this drama triangle in the first place? What was it that made my child feel as though they're a victim? And you know, it may seem completely disproportionate, the reaction you got from what happened in the first place. But the idea is to think, what was it that they felt was too much for them? They couldn't tolerate, that put them in that victim role, that they couldn't tolerate, that they had to get out of. So, it's one thing to talk about this stuff, it's another thing to actually put it into practice. It's really hard. But so to start with, taking that responsibility, choosing to do something different. Secondly, responding with compassion, and going, right, well, when I said, you said you were going to do the coming back to that initial sort of example, I told you to do the dishes. You said you were going to do the dishes and bring down your dirty washing. And you didn't do that. Maybe you were perceived to be critical there. And you're telling them what you've done isn't good enough. Which is fair enough. It maybe, it wasn't good enough. But again, thinking about that sensitivity, them being on a hair trigger, if they perceive you to be in that persecutor role, which places them in victim, how quickly they're going to respond to protect themselves. So maybe they thought, well, you're being critical. When you said, you're not going to get your PlayStation for a week, or you're not getting your PlayStation until you've done it, you're enforcing that rule. You're withholding this thing they think they need for their own enjoyment, for their own happiness and well-being. You're kind of setting that rule and enforcing that rule, which is a really important thing you have to do. So I'm not saying that you just go, oh, no, take the Xbox, it's fine, and no worries. But what I am saying is that you recognize where the difficulty was to begin with, right? You know what? It felt like I was giving you a hard time, or it was really frustrating because you were hearing that you wouldn't be able to get your Xbox. And I know how important that is to you. I get that could be difficult. So what we're going to do is, when I say responding with compassion, we're then thinking about validation. So previously we've talked about validation. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and have a listen to that one. But we've talked about using validation in the quieter moments. Here we're using the validation in the moment. So as things are kind of blowing up a little bit, we're going to use validation as a way just to de-escalate, to connect. And this is linking back to the 3 faces. Listen to that episode as well. But we're connecting, the emotional brain or the feeling brain that's kind of running the show at that moment where people are becoming heightened, struggling to regulate their emotions. We're going to connect with that part of the brain that's going, this isn't right, and I need you, I need you to recognize this. That's the bit you're going to connect with. Not like, wait a minute, no, you understood that we said that if you didn't do these chores, you wouldn't. We're not going to try and rationalize it. We're not going to try and connect with that thinking part of the brain that's likely going to push us further into dysregulation. We're going to connect with the emotional part of the brain that's going, this doesn't feel fair. I don't feel safe. I don't feel in control here. This doesn't feel good. That's the dominant part of the brain. So we're going to connect with that. And we're going to use validation in that moment and go, you know what? I get how upsetting that is. I can see how that would have been. It might have felt like I was being really critical there. It might have felt like I was giving you a hard time, having a go, whatever it might be. Because when you do that, instead of taking up the persecutor role against the victim, when it's persecutor versus victim and you're both swapping it and trying to stay out of that victim role, trying to gain that upper hand, you're in conflict with each other. The problem is the other person trying to take your safety away, trying to take that persecutor role, trying to keep you down in victim. You're against each other. The problem, like I say, is the other person there. When you step out of that and you choose that middle ground of responsibility and compassion, what you're doing is now you're standing more side by side and you're looking at the problem going, right, I get how frustrating that was. I get how upsetting that was. Yeah, they may still be angry with you, but the issue is this overwhelming emotion that they're not able to regulate, they're not able to control. That's the real problem here. The emotional response, the thing that's making them feel, I feel so angry, I feel so bad. Okay, so we're stepping back and we're looking at that and going, yeah, I get that's really tough. I can understand how upsetting that is. So instead of it being like we're against each other, we're more side by side and we're looking at the problem together. Now, most times this takes a lot of the heat out of a conflict, and it will stop escalation, or it will reduce it or slow it down. Gives you a little bit more control, a little bit more breathing room. It may be that you kind of, sometimes people will kind of name it and go, if you've talked about it beforehand with your child, you may be able to go, you know what, I think we're on that drama triangle. I'm gonna go and get a glass of water. I'm gonna go and get myself a drink. I'm gonna come back. I just need to give myself a moment. Some people you can use that as well. But I think it's really important that you bring an awareness to these roles. Look out for it. Anyway, you can see it happening at work. You can see it happening on the TV. You probably see it in your friendships, different relationships. We're all sort of hardwired to respond in these ways. And when you bring an awareness to it, you start noticing it everywhere. And the more you notice it, the quicker you get at noticing it when you're in the middle of it. And you go, okay, I know what's happening here. Right. You've just taken up that victim role because you think I've taken up that persecutor role. And you've jumped up to persecutor, and now I'm in victim, and I'm feeling really triggered myself. And, it helps you to make a little bit of sense of it. So that's the drama triangle, essentially. Now, I once spoke with a parent, and she said something that was really powerful. She said, I realised that, she really connected with that. And she said, I realised that all this time we were on that drama triangle, and we'd have this conflict that would be escalating all the time. And the best that I was trying to hope for in those times was that I was trying to keep my child in victim, and I was trying to end up basically in persecutor. And she's like, if I continue doing that, that's the best I can hope for. That I keep my child in victim, that they feel as though they're a victim and I have the upper hand. She's like, I don't want to do that. And I just thought it was really powerful because what we're hoping for is, again, normalizing that cooperation rather than being in conflict and being like, I have to win so that you lose. It's that we both can look at the problem together. We can both win, and we can both go, wow, that's really tough. We're not in conflict with each other. We're both looking at a problem going, that's difficult. Now, sometimes we can get onto the drama triangle through, like I said, it can be through taking out that rescuer role. Let me fix that for you. I'm going to sort that out. I'm going to step in and do that, making the other person feel, reinforcing the idea that they are a victim, feel powerless. Sometimes it's due to our communication. So I'm going to talk to you about the communication pie as well now. So it's a double one today. You're getting 2 lots of good stuff, hopefully. So the communication pie is really useful. It's something that we do with parents to kind of keep an eye on where we're focusing our energy and attention when it comes to our communication. Now, everything we're talking about is all about communication. Humans, communication is vital for us. We experience life through our communications, mostly with other people. So it's really important we bring a lot of awareness to it. So if you're following along with this, maybe you can draw this out, or you may you just want to watch it if you're watching it on the video. If you're listening, I hope this makes sense to you. If you're listening and not following, not drawing it out as well, I hope you can visualize this. So what I'd like to do is draw a circle and kind of imagining that this circle's a clock face. I'd like to draw a line from the middle of that circle up to 12 o'clock. So just a straight line from the middle straight up to the top of that circle. Then draw another line from the middle of that circle up to where 2 o'clock would be. Again, I don't want you to draw the numbers on, just imagining roughly where 2 o'clock would be on a clock face. Draw a line there. And then I'd like to draw a line down to where 5 o'clock would be. So you should now have what looks like a pie chart with 3 segments. One quite small segment up the top, then a bit more of a chunky segment, put off to the side, and then a final segment just over half of this pie chart. So in the small segment, I'm going to write 7%. That's 7% of this pie chart. In the next segment, 38%. And then in the biggest segment of this pie chart, I'm going to put 55%. So these segments are going to represent the different parts of our communication. So we have three main areas of our communication. One is our non-verbal communication. So, or body language, however you want to put it. These are parts of communication that essentially the bits that we can see. So it's facial expressions. It's what we're doing with our hands. It's, are we tapping our foot? Are we picking our nails? Smiling? How close am I standing to you? All those things. What's my posture? My arms crossed. All those things that we can see, that we pick up on through what we're seeing visually of the other person. So those non-verbal communications, body language. So that's one part of our communication. Another is our tone of voice. How our voice actually sounds when we're talking. It's a big part of our communication. Another big part of our communication. What we sound like when we're talking. And then the third part, another major part of our communication, is the words that we use. The actual words we're using, the things that we're saying. Now, it'd be interesting to know what you think are the, which bit of communication goes with which segment of the pie chart. So, which one of those three, non-verbal, tone of voice, the words we use, which one of those counts for 55% of our communication? Which counts for 38%? Which counts for 7%? You can pause it, have a moment to think if you like, little quiz, little test if you like. But this often surprises people. This is what we do a lot in sessions. And, if we were sitting here having a session together, I'd wait and hear your response, but I can't do that here. So I'm just going to tell you. So quite surprisingly, for some people, 55% of our communication is our non-verbal communication, our body language, the signals we're giving off in terms of, what our faces are doing, how we're holding ourselves, all those visual cues. That's 55% of our communication. This is as well when we're, face to face with someone, when we're in the same physical space. We're not talking about communication over text or emails or phones, obviously. Now, the next biggest part of our communication is our tone of voice. So 38% of our communication is our tone of voice. Again, surprises a lot of people. How we're saying something matters an awful lot. Which leaves us with 7% of our communication being the actual words we're using, which isn't that much. But what we often find is that that's the bit that everyone focuses on. That's the bit that we're really putting all our effort and all our thought into. We're really focusing on saying what it is we need to say, and we're trying to get our point across, and we often use a lot of words, a lot of communication in terms of the actual words we're saying. That's where we put our energy. Now, this can, maybe give a bit of an example here, but it may be that you shout upstairs to your child, "Dinner's on the table," right? Now, you don't mean it to sound aggressive. You're not being horrible. You're just letting them know dinner's on the table. But simply the act of shouting may trigger an emotional response in that child. It may be that you're saying something quite kind, but you're not looking particularly friendly. You're scowling. I know things have been really tough for you. I get that. And you look angry. And I don't know, often I hear from parents and they say, My child always says, "You're shouting at me." And they're like, "I'm not shouting, I'm just talking." But other bits of the communication are more important. They're picking up on non-verbal cues. They're picking up on, the tone of voice, and they perceive it as shouting, even though your voice is quiet. You're not raising your voice, but the child will perceive it as shouting because they're picking up on all these other bits of the communication other than simply the words you're saying. So I guess the point here being, address the bits that you're really focusing on. Are you giving loads of attention to the words you're saying and ignoring the more important parts of the communication, which is how you're saying it? What's your body language saying? What's your tone of voice? So these are more important. So, it's like, if you've ever met someone that you really don't trust and something just feels really off about them, and there's nothing they say to you, it all sounds fine, but something just isn't right with this person. It doesn't feel good. You're picking up on the cues from their body language and their tone of voice. And most times we listen more to those bits of communication than the words someone's saying. Or sometimes we kick ourselves, we go, "I knew I shouldn't have trusted that person." We go against our instinct. And we regret it sometimes later. And that, it just goes to show that the things that we really feel that really matter are those bits of body language and the tone of voice, those aspects of our communication. Now, also, I'm going to link this to Three Faces again, coming back to that what we talked about in that podcast. In that, when we talked about that, the Three Faces, if you think your child is using this behavior, it's likely that they are quite often, their line is quite high. They are probably quite close to dysregulation. Quite often, they are showing that they aren't able to regulate their emotions by their behavior. They can't do it really. So that line's going to be quite high for them. They're close to, that line's getting close to the top for them. So they have limited thinking brain available. Now, what happens is if we focus a lot of our communication on talking and on the words we're using, we're asking their thinking brain to do more work. And that thinking brain needs to be given space in order just to regulate the emotions. So rather than focusing so much of our energy on the words we're saying, if we just went, I'm not going to use so many words. I'm going to focus much more on the way I'm saying this and my tone of voice. How can I communicate calm here? How can I communicate care? How can I communicate safety? Because a lot of this comes back to feelings of safety, feelings of security. Then we often find that we get better results. So I guess, if you can think about your communication a little bit more, again, same with the drama triangle, bringing an awareness to this is, a big part of it. Being aware of your tone of voice, being aware of, how am I holding myself? What are my hands doing? What's my facial expression doing? How close am I standing? How loud is my voice? All these things. How quickly am I speaking? The more awareness you can bring to it, the more you can influence yourself, the more control you have, the more you can make choices in terms of how you want to use these things, which are going to be more useful, again, to making sure you can de-escalate situations and keep things safer. And the more you can de-escalate and the safer you can keep things, the more you can normalize not being in that place of conflict. And the more you normalize that, the more everyone in the family expects to be more in that place of cooperation rather than in conflict. And that in turn can start to change the narrative around what we do in our relationship. So rather than someone always being I'm ready to fight because I know we always fight. If you can be the person that manages things, that creates an environment where it's easy for people to stay regulated, you start expecting that more. And that's a really important, part of all of this as well. Anyway, so that's the drama triangle and the communication pie. Hope there's some useful stuff in there. Keep them in mind. You might want to, with both of these, draw these out, put them up on the fridge, put them up inside of a kitchen cabinet, put them up on the wall in your bedroom, whatever, somewhere where you're going to see them, because you probably will forget about it. And, it's good to remind yourself. Equally, you put it up somewhere in your home where your child may see it, they may go, what's that? And you say, I was learning about this thing. Or I heard about this thing. Have a conversation about it. This is stuff that relates to all of us. This is human stuff. This isn't right because you're a bad child, or because you can't control yourself. But no, this is us. This is what happens with humans. This is being human, essentially. You can have that conversation, maybe. See how it goes. Only do that, obviously, if you feel like it's safe to do so. But your family better than anyone, so see if you think that could be worthwhile. Right, I'm going to leave it there. That's a long one. Like I said, hopefully some useful stuff in there. We'll see you next time. All right, thank you.